parking tickets and leave me alone. Stick to something you know about.
Listen, my daughter was about your age. Then she met a guy like you. Now she's dead.
You should believe in ghosts, P-Brain.
He's a closet. Don't hurt me, please. Don't keep me waiting for those onions, Hermit.
This is all the whiskey you possess?
Everyone out of the way of the bulldozer!
Hello and welcome to Hello, This is the Doom Show. I am Richard. Folks, it's just me. I am punishing you with another solo episode by myself without another person talking.
Why must I be a teenager in love?
Today's topic is horror movie reference and horror movie review books. And I'm going to split this up into two parts because if I tried to do this as one episode, it would probably be really huge. So I'm going to stick with the two-part format. I'm not sure which Matt I'm talking about. Maybe Matt McDonough. I can't decide. So let's just get into this, and you can thank or dis-thank me later. Honestly, though, I hope you guys are doing well as can be expected. I personally have eaten some kielbasa, potatoes, and Brussels sprouts, so I'm okay. I'm okay. So what's the deal? Why do I want to talk about these book-shaped objects? Well, I find horror movie reference guides, horror movie review books very inspiring. So inspiring that I wrote a few myself. Without some of the following books I'm going to mention, there would be no Giallo Meltdown, there would be no Cinema Somnambulist, there'd be no Doomed Movie-thon. All three of those available at Amazon.com. So the journey began in the early 2000s when, based on a conversation I had with my good pal Nafa, I started getting back into horror. So I think in 2001 or late 2000, and I just started renting horror like crazy. And then when my wife Liette and I were dating, it just became a thing. I started collecting movies. I started collecting movies, started buying DVDs, and I was having trouble, knowing what to buy because rental shops were in their late stage death where they were making space for all the new movies and keeping very little of their old stock. So you'd have 2,500 copies of Mission Impossible 3, and in order to have that many copies of Mission Impossible 3, they'd gotten rid of all of their frickin' horror movies that were older than, 2001. So I had to buy movies. You had to buy these movies to see them. Downloading movies was really not a thing I understood or had a computer that could handle. So I was out at those DVD stores, and of course VHS sales and looking for things. I never really collected VHS as much as I collected DVDs. So I had to turn to books to help me find these movies. What I did was I looked for horror movie books at my local library, and I found a bevy of titles to get started. And I quickly found myself obsessed with some of these early books. By the way, before I get into this, if I casually mention a book and I don't say anything in any detail about it, I just mention the title and the authors, it's mainly because I remember reading it at one point, but it was so long ago, like 10 years ago, that I don't recall a lot of stuff. So take those with a grain of salt. If I don't remember them, maybe just look them up and see if they're right for you. Hopefully, a lot of these are still easy to find used. They're probably gonna generally be out of print, so beware of that. So anyway, here's some early things that I read that got me all fired up and helped me locate horror movies. Let's talk about the official Splatter Movie Guides, Volume 1 and 2, by John McCarty. This is honestly like the first thing I grabbed, so I began to pursue gore movies and splatter movies primarily at first, because of course, horror movie fans, not all, but a lot, we generally love the rush we get from a nice gore set piece. And this book, books by John McCarty, was very, very fun to help me source those titles. John McCarty wrote a lot of stuff. He has a lot of horror movie books. They range in quality. He was definitely interested in the topic and knew a lot about things, but I didn't agree with a lot of his opinions. I didn't really dig a lot of his other books once I got a hold of them. At one point, I had 6 or 7 of his books, and they didn't grab me the way the Splatter Movie Guides did. And he would obviously say if a movie was a piece of crap, but you have to see this gore sequence. And that's where it came down to me disagreeing with him, where he would say, this scene is the only reason to watch, insert title here. And I'd watch the movie and just be amazed by the whole movie. And the gore scene was great. But then I was like, wait a minute. This guy's kind of a meanie. We're going to talk about the number one meanie. The number one meanie in a minute. The meanest meanie. Around that time, I got another book called Terror on Tape by James O'Neill. Shout out to Brad. Brad, I know, is a big fan of this book, Terror on Tape. I found that these books that I loved and kept rechecking out from the library were, $1, $2, maybe $10 at most on Amazon used. So I, of course, got my own copies and proceeded to take highlighters to them and pens to them and make notes and try to find these things. Make sure I knew, down the road to check out said film in the entries. I can't stress enough how great those short capsule reviews are. They're, the short, concise, lets you know what you need to know. I don't care as much about 5-star ratings. So if a book has a 1 through 5-star rating, I kind of don't care. I don't like those as much because what happens is my brain says, hey, this only got 1 star. I'm not going to read this. So I'd move on. That doesn't work for me. I prefer just the writing and no rating at all. I always like that. But, a good book like Terror on Tape or a fun book like the Splatter Movie Guides, who cares? It was around this time that I took up cigar smoking. My father-in-law poisoned my life by introducing me to cigar smoking. Now, granted, I did ask him for that first cigar, so it's not on him. But many, many hours in many apartments spent out on the back patio with a cigar and these books, usually in the dead of summer in Florida, sweating and drinking a frickin' gargantuan-sized soda from 7-Eleven, and just reading and taking in all this information. And one book that I really, really love is the Encyclopedia of Horror, edited by Phil Hardy. I don't know if this is the Overlook Encyclopedia. It might be related. The one I'm talking about is the one with Jack Nicholson from The Shining on the cover. That's the one I have read the entire book. It's such a great book. It's not organized by alphabetical. It's organized by year of release and then alphabetical. The what do you call it? The index in the back has it listed under year and then title. So it's really difficult to just open up and find where a movie is. You have to kind of guess roundabouts what year it is if you're looking for something. The meanie I was hinting at is a guy named Jim Harper. He wrote a book called Legacy of Blood. Because, of course, I got obsessed with slasher movies. I'm still obsessed with slasher movies. You really have to screw up a slasher for me not to enjoy it. And so Jim Harper did this great book about slasher movies. I didn't really pick up on it the first time, but when I reread it later, I noticed something about Jim Harper, is that he's very hard to please. He doesn't seem to like anything. And the reason I found out is because I got his book about Italian horror called Italian Horror. And he is such a jerk in that book about the movies. It's so funny. The book in question, he starts from Suspiria, post-Suspiria, or was it post-Suspiria? No, I think it was post-Lucio Fulci's Zombie 2. And I think, so it's 79 through the 90s. And man, he didn't like anything. So basically any Italian horror that Jeffrey and I have covered at some point that's like the late 80s stuff, he hated it. He just hated it. And that's when I went back to Legacy of Blood and I was like, oh crap, this guy is the same guy. He doesn't like slashers so much. If you find a copy of Legacy of Blood, take all of the reviews with a grain of salt. I don't know what to say. I kind of blame him for why I got into writing about horror, other than, reading people's reviews online that I disagreed with. I strongly disagreed with Jim Harper on almost everything. And that's kind of what spurred me to get off my butt and do my own book, because this guy wasn't cutting it. Horror Films of the 1970s by John Kenneth Muir. It's M-U-I-R, by the way, Muir. Or Meow Meow. This is a great resource if you're looking for 70s movies. He also did an 80s one, but I have not read that. I tore apart those frickin' 1970s ones, because for a while there, the 70s was my favorite era of horror, and now I'm kind of split between 70s and 80s. I love 70s and 80s horror, but then, of course, I see something amazing from the 60s, and I'm like, well,
I like everything.
Okay, so I remember this book very not a lotty. I barely remember this book, but I definitely read it. It's called Uneasy Dreams, The Golden Age of British Horror Films, 1956 to 1976 by Gary A. Smith. That's another one from my library that I read, and I just don't remember anything about it, other than it was a great resource for finding good old British horror films. Another book that I got through my library's interlibrary loan, so I don't remember it very well, is Trash Fiend, Disposable Horror Fare of the 1960s and 70s by Scott Aaron Stein. I remember the cover. Don't remember the book. I'm sure I got some use out of it. If you can find that one, let me know what I thought of it. All right, here comes the heavy stuff here. This is a heavy book. Men, Women, and Chainsaws by Carol J. Clover. So Carol J. Clover wrote this amazing book that is very dense with the language, very academic. It will not be the only very academic book I mention in this series I'm talking about here. But she's really incredible. It's one of those books you can't casually read. You have to shut out the world and really, really, really pay attention to. I think a lot of it is Freudian, the way she approaches these horror movies. But it's really cool just to see her take on The Final Girl and, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and, the different ways you can interpret all of these wonderful images that come flying at you in horror movies. A really fun book that I highly recommend if you are one of those Deadite people is The Evil Dead Companion by Bill Warren. It's just a lovely book. Just lovely. Lots and lots of trivia. If you are at all interested in how Evil Dead was made, like all the process that Sam Raimi and Ted Raimi and Bill Bill Campbell, yeah, that guy. Bruce Campbell, the way they made that film is really, really cool. Very easy to read that book cover to cover very quickly. I highly recommend it. A British book that I found, I think Lietta got me this for Christmas one year. It is called Creeping Flesh, the Horror Fantasy Film Book, edited by David Kerekes. I believe that's how you say it. It's Kerekes. And this was how I found out about the ghost stories for Christmas. Those British, that British tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas, and those wonderful M.R. James adaptations that the BBC was so fond of in the late 60s and 70s. Just really a fun book, and I'm still tracking stuff down from it. There's just little things that they talk about. It's really cool. It was a good mix of review and nostalgia. So, people were kind of approaching these things like those BBC ghost stories from the perspective of how they affected the youth of Britain while they were watching those things. So it does a great piece on Ghost Watch. There's a great piece on Ghost Watch, great piece on Sleepwalker, and other just cool stuff. Find it. Here's a subject near and dear to all of our hearts, and it is Vincent Price. There's an excellent book called Vincent Price, The Art of Fear, by Dennis Michael. I say Michael weird because it could be Michael or Michael. It's Meikle. I like this book. It's a nice crash course in all things Vincent Price, since his career was so huge. It's you can't just go movie by movie without getting lost in the weeds. I have not read this in a long time, but I certainly enjoy it. It's still sitting on my shelves, waiting for all the fun to begin all over again. Okay, speaking of larger-than-life people, going to go ahead and talk about Takashi Miike, which I believe his last name is Miike or Maike. I've been saying Takashi Miike for so many years because I didn't know anyone else who talked about him that I just say Miike all the time. So it's Miike. Maike? Takashi Miike. Yes, I'm probably going to keep pronouncing it wrong. Sorry, everybody. Anyway, Agitator, the cinema of Takashi Miike, I'm saying it, I don't care, by Tom Mess. That's M-E-S is his last name. Wow, this was important because I'd seen Audition and I had seen Ichi the Killer, and I wanted to know more. And so I was able to check out Agitator from my local library, and whoa, just like Jess Franco, good old Takashi Miike, his cinema is freaking dense, prolifically dense, whatever. He's made so many movies, and what's great about Agitator is it gives you the first, I guess 15 years of his career, and it goes movie by movie. And I mean every movie. It goes through everything. And so I was able to track down stuff that I would have never, ever thought to watch. Just every genre you can think of. And I really, really owe this book a lot for helping me get even deeper into Asian cinema. I've got another Asian cinema book coming up right here. But Japanese cinema has always caught me, like just held on to me. I've always been into anime since I was a young kid. And so, of course, once you watch a ton of anime, you just start watching Japanese live-action cinema as well. Especially, samurai films or action. There's always more blood, more insanity, and all of the things you just don't understand from a culture as different from yours. So yes, I like cultural misunderstandings. Speaking of cultural misunderstandings, a little book called Sex and Zen and a Bullet in the Head by Steve Hammond and Mike Wilkins. This book is essential for Hong Kong cinema. This is a great way to just jump right in and just get through all of the important titles you need to see to even begin to understand the Hong Kong film industry and the Chinese film industry. It's just so right. This book is such a treasure. I can't even, there's just titles swirling through my mind. Wicked City, the live action version, Naked Killer, Close Encounters of the Spooky Kind. There's a lot. There's a lot to unpack. Ricky O, the story of Ricky, all that stuff's in that book. And it just gives you great reviews of the things you just didn't know you needed to see, but you have to see. Very inspiring stuff. Highly recommend that one. All right, we'll return to America after my awkward talking about Asian culture. And what I'm talking about is good old Joe Bob Briggs. So, Joe Bob Briggs wrote some books in the 80s. Joe Bob Goes to the Drive-In. Joe Bob Goes Back to the Drive-In. They are hard to find. They are really, 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 really out of print. I just sold mine for $60 a piece. So hopefully the person that I sold them to is listening and they understand. They're fun books written in his Joe Bob character, which has changed so much over the years. Let's just say that the Joe Bob that everybody sees on Shudder now or remembers from the TNT show. Oh my God, I'm blanking. I'm blanking on what is TNT show. Monster Vision. Very different from those days. Painfully politically incorrect, and always in character. The reviews were more diatribes about imaginary characters, like people he made up, stories of seeing these films in the drive-in while trying to make out with some woman, and all of it's just gobbledygook silliness, but then the film reviews are great. And, I read them a couple times, and it was just time to move on, so I had no problem selling them. The two books that I actually have reread, one of them, and I want to reread another, is Joe Bob's Profoundly Disturbing, about horror and other movies that shocked the nation, and it's just an excellent book. Then he wrote a book called Profoundly Erotic, which is really awesome. It's about movies that shocked the nation from the sex film industry, like I Am Curious Yellow and Deep Throat and all these other seminal works of erotic art on celluloid. And the problem with those books is they're also out of print. Recently, I was able to actually get a copy of Profoundly Disturbing. I have not found Profoundly Erotic yet. They're great books, so if you can find them, good luck. I recommend Joe Bob's books. Less so the drive-in books. They're okay. I'm sure you can find his comedy novels. He's written some comedy novels that I don't want to read. I just don't want to hear his redneck character talk about how the cavemen days were good. I'm assuming that's what his books are about. But anyway. Now we're going to get to something I am very passionate about. A little book called Shock December. That's one word, Shock December. Written by Charles Roxburgh, Tom Scalzo, and Matt Farley. When I was shopping for books on Amazon, the cheapest book was Shock December. And it was about three friends who spent 48 hours watching 21 horror films and documenting the insanity. Now, I've talked about these guys before. I've talked about these books before. I will certainly talk about them again in an upcoming episode at some point. But this book really changed everything for me. I've been having movie-thons since high school. My best friend Scott was like, hey, let's have a movie-thon. And I was like, okay. And he's like, let's rent all the Death Wish movies and all the Phantasm movies. So we stayed up all night watching Phantasm 1 and 2. Those were the only ones available at the time. Watching all the Death Wish movies, watching Bullet, watching The Changeling. or throwing in Enter the Dragon or something. But we just, go all night, eating frickin' Twizzlers, drinking Snapple, eating pizza rolls, or an embarrassing amount of Chinese food. It was just a natural thing that my buddy Scott and I did. It was just wonderful because eventually you get that euphoria from ingesting too much insanity into your eyeballs. And then here were these guys that were doing this, and they made a book out of it. And I was looking at my website like, I have a website called Doomed Moviethon. It's just a bunch of horror movie reviews. I've never written out a moviethon. I've been having moviethons forever. Let's do this. So I had my first moviethon, which was Doomed Fulci-thon, where I watched 18 Lucio Fulci films in 48 hours. And that was a huge mistake. I completed that moviethon, but I've never managed to get that many films in that short of amount of time again. I've had longer moviethons in terms of number of films, but it's usually a 3-day moviethon or a 4-day moviethon before I got up to like the 23rd film or whatever. But those books are great. I don't agree with their reviews, but I always love their spirit. They've written other books, Shock July, Shock June, Shock January. Most of these are still available on Amazon. I highly recommend them. If you enjoy my books, Doomed Moviethon or Giallo Meltdown, then give these guys a look. Whew, man, getting tired. I've never recorded a podcast episode this long before. So now let's talk about Brad. One of the first books that Brad ever sent me when our friendship was blossoming the way our love blossomed. Wowie, wow, wow. Brad sent me a book called Easy Riders, Raging Bulls by Peter Biskind, Biskind. I had maybe seen this at the bookstore and didn't know what it was about. My blinders were on, so I was trained just on horror, so I wasn't really reading books about other genres. And of course, if you know this book, you know it's very inspiring. It's all about Coppola and Spielberg and De Palma and George Lucas and frickin' Paul Schrader. I don't know, a bunch of people are in this book. The story of how these guys changed American filmmaking forever. We had our own little, revolution in this country of filmmaking, and these were all the guys that brought this about. And it's a fascinating book. I want to read it again sometime. I've read it a couple times now. It's really good. But yeah, Brad had a library copy. Like he didn't steal it from the library. No, it was a book sale, and he just got it for me. And I've really appreciate, because that led to me reading lots of books about movies, like that one, what is it called, The Kid Stays in the Picture by whoever the hell that was, and especially this next book, Future Noir, The Making of Blade Runner by Paul M. Salmon. That's Sammon. I am a Blade Runner fan. I am a fan of Blade Runner 2049. So of course, after reading this book twice, once totally by accident, I checked out Future Noir, and I was reading it, and I got halfway through it, and I went, this seems really familiar. This is a huge book, and it's a hell of a commitment to read. So I just could not believe that I'd forgotten that I'd ever read it, and it's such a great book. And when Blade Runner 2049 came out, they put out an expanded edition. So, of course, I bought that immediately. I have not read this expanded edition, but I plan on it. It's just such a great book. If you love those nitty-gritty details about filmmaking, or especially just the story of how a film gets made, like when it's bouncing from producer to what studio is going to buy the script and who's doing what, like all that stuff is really cool to me. Even a movie that turned out shitty, I love the story. For instance, I was just listening to one of my favorite shows, Pick Six Movies, and they were doing the story of the first Lara Croft movie, and I could not believe how detailed and insane the story from the video game to that first movie is. It's batshit crazy. I highly recommend that episode of Pick Six Movies. Whew, this is just the first list. And I got one more to do here that's movie related. Not exactly a movie book. You'll see what I mean in a second. But yeah, this is just the first list of this stuff. I'm going to have a whole second episode where I dig into ones that I'm much more familiar with, like stuff I've read a lot more recently, so I have a lot more to say about those. But anyway, last book, Xerox Ferox by John Spoonar. I believe I'm messing up your name, or it might be Spoonar. It is Szpunar, and that's Xerox Ferox, so Xerox like Xerox, Ferox Ferox, like Cannibal Ferox. Okay. Brad struck again, and I know this book is out of print, so find it if you can. It is an excellent book just about movie zines. You're on this journey in this book of all these horror movie guys who were unsatisfied with movie reviews in, the TV Guide or the newspaper, and so they just wanted to self-publish their thoughts on movies themselves. And so they created a zine because they needed to get their thoughts out there. And then this network of zines, horror movie zines, spread out all over the country. And what this book does is it talks to everybody they could track down from this late 60s through early 80s, actually through early 90s, just all these people making these cool zines. Some of these people would go on to start Fangoria, or they'd go on to Gore Zone, or they'd go on to whatever. It's such an inspiring frickin' book. It's so full of passion, very opinionated people. It is a wonder. It is a huge book. It took me like over a year to get through it. It's really, really good. And just hearing the stories of what people went through to get these things printed, like old school print shops and stuff like that, it's just the coolest thing ever. So Xerox Ferox, I highly recommend it. So that's it for this episode of the horror movie reference and review books. I'll definitely do a part 2. I wanted to get into the European stuff and the Giallo books that I reference, things that are even harder to find, things that are wildly expensive, and just stuff that I don't know how I even acquired these things over the years. But yes, we'll get to that when we get to that. Until that happy time, here's some updates. I want to talk about some things going on with the show and some things going on with me that I thought you guys might find interesting. First up, since it's winter and apparently it's cold, Jeffrey and I have a wintry episode, very unusual wintry episode, a little movie called The American Scream. I believe it's 89. Let me just double check real quick. It is not that one. It is the other one. It is 1988. It is not to be confused with the 2012 documentary about people who go all out on Halloween. This is directed by Mitchell Linden, 1988. Very strange movie, but takes place in winter, and Jeffrey thought it'd be good to get this one out before things warm up in the world. A Simon episode that is in the works. Let me look at my files, because I thought I knew what I was talking about, and then I didn't. So here's a little peek behind the scenes. I have folders on my computer. Wow. Yes, so Simon and I, we recorded, this is so long ago now, Nightmare on Elm Street, our part 3. We're going to be talking about New Nightmare, Freddy vs. Jason, and the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. And it's funny, I forgot just how long ago we did this. Let's see, what is this date on here? I guess it's not too bad. We frickin' recorded these back in April, starting in April of 2020. So they're not a year old yet. Hey, but so expect a huge, massive episode there. In between those two episodes, I have a special mystery interview. Now, I hinted in this episode about someone, and that someone will be interviewed, or someones. I'm going to drop that after the Jeffrey episode, so be prepared for me to be fawning all over somebody and acting all nervous and nerdy because I'm very excited to talk to them. And then, eventually you'll hear part 2 of these horror movie reference / review book thingies. And while I was talking about the zine book, the Xerox Ferox, I thought, whoa, I should do like an episode about horror movie magazines. What? Yeah, so eventually I'll do a solo episode just about my horror movie magazines because I love them. And I am currently writing Giallo Meltdown Volume 2. I might have mentioned this in the show before. I'm not sure. I definitely talked about this on my YouTube channel. I've written about 4 or 5 chapters. I'm having another movie-thon very soon. I have all these Italian Giallo and pseudo-partially Giallo movies. When the popularity of the Giallo was waning, the VHS industry was booming. So what would be the natural thing you would do with a wane and a boom? Well, you whip out your wang and frickin' make some erotic thrillers. So, yep, Italy got all sexy and made a bunch of erotic thrillers. So I'm going to be watching some of those. And have some unseen movies by good old Pupi Avati. He of The House of the Laughing Windows. Hopefully somebody like Vinegar Syndrome or something is going to do a Pupi Avati box set. I could see Severin doing a big Avati box set. I think I'd call it Look at All This Poopy, and it would be great. I just made myself laugh at that stupid crap I just said. Oh boy. But that's it for me, y'all. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you guys. If you want to contact me, doomedmoviethon@gmail.com, or come over to the Doomed Moviethon Multiverse group on Facebook. I'm always in there goofing off. And yeah, it's just been fun to talk to y'all. If you have any books that you want me to talk about, or just want me to tell other people to check them out, please let me know in an email. I'll give a shout out to Jacob Gustafson. He's a friend of the show. He's written a pair of books so far called Awful Awesome, and it's about watching awesome movies, awful awesome movies with your friends, socially distanced, of course. But Awful Awesome Volume 1 is all about action movies, and I learned so much from reading that book. I am really bad about action movies, be they cheesy or genuinely good, and so that book, I have a huge list of things that, because I read that book, I must see now. Usually Robert Zadar is involved. Another book he has out, I have not picked this one up yet, but I plan to. It's Awful Awesome Volume 2. This is the horror one. I'm very excited to see what he recommends from the world of horror. But that's Jacob Gustafson, friend of the show. Check out his books. Hello, and welcome to Hello, This is the Doomed Show. I am Richard. Folks, it's another solo episode, although you could say it's so low. Because I'm involved. I promised, and I am delivering part 2 of my horror movie reference books. Horror movie, why am I repeating myself? Cult film books talkin'. And sure enough, as I was making the list for this episode, I realized very quickly that there's going to be a part 3. So I've already taken notes on part 3 as well. So there's definitely going to be a part 3 because this was a very long and involved process. Today, we're going to focus on the Giallo horror and Euro horror section of my bookshelves. So this will be of interest to all of you. But before I get to that, we have some feedback I want to read. Our pal Mark, friend of the show, contributor to this podcast, aka Deadly Enabler. Thanks, Mark. This is your fault. He wrote in and said some things about the horror movie reference book part 1 episode show talking. He says, Richard, the idea of doing 2 solo shows on reference and review books for horror films is an excellent one. You should do 3. Okay, he didn't say that last part. I enjoyed listening to the first show and I'm looking forward to the second. And third. He didn't say that. I started seeking out books on movies in the mid-1980s. These books encompassed all genres, but my strong interest in horror was already well underway at that time. Doubtless, one of the things that contributed to that interest was the fact that the library at my elementary school had a significant number of books on horror movies. These books included stills from the classic Universal monster movies as well as Hammer films. I remember looking at those photographs with wonder and fascination. From then until the late 1990s / very early 2000s, I purchased many books on movies, especially reference and review books on genre films, a few of which you mentioned on your show. Sadly, many of the independent bookstores that I was familiar with started to disappear in the latter half of the 1990s. The same can be said for independent music stores and video stores, as well as authentic ma-and-pa diners and restaurants. However, during that period, Borders and Barnes & Noble still had pretty amazing inventories of books, music, and movies. I'm really quite astonished when I think about all that I could find at either one of those chains. Of course, Borders is no more, and the selection one finds at Barnes & Noble in recent years is greatly diminished. I have kept only one book on genre movies from that time of collecting. It is the Overlook Film Encyclopedia. The edition that I have features The Bride of Frankenstein on its cover. It is a great book and a truly handsome one. Even though I disagree strongly with some of the reviews in its pages, the writing is very good, and the authors are knowledgeable and thoughtful. In recent years, I have purchased only a handful of reference books on genre movies. One is Stephen Thrower's amazing Nightmare USA. I also bought the excellent DVD Delirium Volumes 1 through 4. The other 2 are the wonderful Giallo Meltdown and Doomed Movie-thon, written by some remarkably talented and creative duder in Florida. Who is that? I will be keeping these books. They are awesome. Take care, Richard. I hope you are doing well. Best wishes, Mark. P.S. You mentioned something about video stores during your last show that made me think of Screaming in High Heels, the rise and fall of the Scream Queen era. Have you seen that documentary? Truthfully, it is one of my very favorite documentaries on genre movies. I adore Brinke Stevens, Linnea Quigley, and Michelle Bauer, and I have a lot of affection for the many movies from the likes of David Duchovny II and Fred Olen Ray from the 1980s and early 1990s. Anyway, there's a very
Interesting and succinct section in...
there's a very interesting and succinct section in Screaming in High Heels that goes into the huge and negative impact that Blockbuster had on video stores and low to moderately budget filmmaking. It's good. Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate your kind words, especially when you managed to plug what I was going to plug, which is Giallo Meltdown, a Movie-thon diary, available now at Amazon.com. It's related to this content. I miss Borders. Borders was awesome. I did manage to clean up when they were closing, the one over here in Tampa. We got a lot of cool stuff. I got that Vincent Price box set, DVD set that I think MGM did. I got it for crazy discounted because they were just trying to move stuff out of there. I really miss a bookstore in St. Pete here. It's still there, but they moved. I have a bad feeling that their new location isn't going to be as great as the old one. It's called Wilson's. I really miss Wilson's. Wilson's was awesome. I picked up lots of my 70s and early 80s horror books, horror books about horror movies, that is. I totally forgot that DVD Delirium exists. Folks, if you can find DVD Delirium Volumes 1 through 4, grab them, because I had them and then I sold them because, I tend to sell things and then regret it later. But those are great books. I love them. And I will absolutely be checking out screaming in high heels. The Rise and Fall of the Scream Queen era. I've been meaning to watch that, and I'm going to watch it. Folks, if you want to write in like Mark did, it's doomedmoviethon@gmail.com. Send me an email, I'll read it, or send me an MP3 and I'll play it. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
When it's good time party time, make it something really special. Stock up with plenty of Squirt and Diet Squirt, because both feel right at home wherever friends and fun mix. To get a great party going and make any get-together bubble, invite friends that mix well, like Squirt and Diet Squirt. Both super refreshers, both super party starters.
So let's get to talking about this subject. I have been collecting these frickin' books for years and years and years, and I've been gifted some great stuff from my wife and from friends. So yeah, that's why these 3 episodes are so huge, because I have a lot of movies that are book-like, which are just books about movies, about books. Let's get started with the Giallo stuff. First and foremost, we'll talk about Profondo Argento by Alan Jones. This book is really funny to me. It's an excellent resource, especially when it came out. It was back before every single thing in the world was on the internet. And so I loved finding this book. It's funny because in the book, Alan Jones actually goes to the set of several Argento films as they're being made and interviews whoever, composer, cinematographer, and interviews Dario Argento himself or the cast. And he's very, very kind and praises everything he sees, and he discusses his excitement about being there. And then immediately the review of the movie is really negative and tears the movie apart. So I guess you get a fair and balanced review of the stuff from Mr. Jones. I kind of get a little bummed out by this one just because it's too negative. And I don't like opinions that are different than mine. So, a resource that for listeners of Hello, This is the Doom Show, you've heard us talk about this book many times. This book comes up, and I love when I can find some way to sneak it into the discussion. And this would be Spaghetti Nightmares, written by Luca Palmarini and Gaetano Mistretta, which I have right here. It's old as hell now. I would love to see an updated edition. This is from Phantasma Books. That's the book. I have it right here. I got it because I didn't want to write down the subtitle. The subtitle is Italian Fantasy Horrors as Seen Through the Eyes of Their Protagonists. This book rocks. It also sucks, but we'll talk about why it sucks in a minute. Why it rocks is the interview section. We've got, just to name a few, Claudio Argento, Dario Argento, Lamberto Bava, a.k.a. Lambava.
The more Lambava, more better.
Stefania Cassini, Mimsy Farmer, Lucio Fulci, Umberto Lenzi, Antonio Margheriti, Aristide Massachesi, a.k.a. Joe D'Amato, Tom Savini, apparently he's Italian, Michele Soave, and even Terrence Stamp, who was in that frickin' Fellini movie. And good old David Warbeck. Now, those are great. This is a great, great resource for getting to know the people behind the camera. It's not very thorough, but it's pretty thorough. The whole book is only about 192 pages. So the interviews aren't super in-depth, but they're all really cool. Okay, so what sucks about this book? In the back of the book, there are capsule reviews, like 1 or 2 sentence reviews, sometimes a little more in-depth, of Giallo films, Italian horror, and like some Italian genre stuff. And it is loaded with spoilers. So be careful. Read these very gingerly. But the opinions are really funny. Usually they'll be like, this movie is this. here's the entire plot. By the way, this sucks. It's really fun. I would recommend you getting this book and then using the back of the book as a way to find titles you've never heard of. But, beware of spoilers. So that's essential. Love it. Of course, next is another book I have right in front of me here. See here, this one. I have to be careful because this one's been glued back together. Folks, I'll give you a few seconds to guess which one I'm talking about. Let's just say, over the years, all the pages have fallen out, and multiple times have I had to glue them back in. I'm talking, of course, about Blood and Black Lace, The Definitive Guide to Italian Sex and Horror Movies by Adrian Luther Smith. This is a Giallo Finders Keepers Bible right here. And like I said, this book is falling apart. It was not made very well. And I love this book. It is so good. It can be a little bit harsh, but I think it's more fair. I think it's open-minded. It's got Italian and Spanish Giallo movies hiding in here. And it's just incredible. Another one that needs an update. Even if folks are having trouble finding these, I'd like to see them reprinted. Even if like the authors of Spaghetti Nightmares and the author of this one, that you're not interested in doing an expanded edition. I just like to see these back in print. This was a Dark Side magazine from the UK. This is one of their publications. I think this one's harder to get than Spaghetti Nightmares, but both are great. All right. Next up, we have Beyond Terror, the films of Lucio Fulci by Stephen Thrower. There's going to be a lot more Stephen Thrower talking, because Stephen Thrower is one of my favorite writers on genre cinema, period. I would love to just anything, whatever. Even if he did a book about comedies or like blockbuster movies, that would be great. But no, he is very much a brilliant dude. You've probably seen him show up on Jess Franco movie commentaries and Lucio Fulci movie extras. He's just great. But Beyond Terror is another book that I tore up, dude. I was like, I've already got the second edition, which is expanded. I think they found some more movies that were harder to locate before. And also he wanted to tell a very less than flattering story about when he actually met Fulci. But you'll find that pretty great. What else can I say about Beyond Terror? It also talks about the Italian film industry and how Fulci fits into it, which is really, really fascinating to me. Cannot stress enough. If you can track down Beyond Terror, either edition is great. Of course, you probably want the newer one because it's a longer book. It's also massive. It's a massive book. It's not as big as that Mario Bava book that Tim Lucas did, which I do not have because I'm not crazy. Brad is crazy. Brad has that one. When I visited him many years ago, I got to actually hold it, and I broke both my arms trying to lift it. So Lietta had to turn the pages for me, and she had to use one of those grabber things because even she's not strong enough to turn a page in that book. She's very strong, normally. So we went from Lucio Fulci. Let's get into some Dario Argento. Oh, we already started. Let's get back into Dario Argento. I'm talking, of course, about Fear, the autobiography of Dario Argento, which I really enjoyed. I got that recently and just blasted through it. It's very interesting. The only thing I didn't like was the farther he got into his filmography, the less detail-oriented he got with discussing the films. The first half of the book, like his personal life and how he got into filmmaking, and the first, round of films up through, I'm going to go ahead and say, I don't know, I guess it's pretty detailed up through Suspiria, but then it starts to flag a little bit. I wanted more, which is, that's a compliment from me. If a book I've read leaves me wanting more, awesome. But yeah, and it's not very expensive, I don't think, so get that one. We're going to talk about La Dolce Morte from Michael J. Coven. Michael is spelled Mikel. That's Michael J. Koven. This book, wow, is This is not a book you can casually read. This is a book where you have to really set aside some time. It is extremely critical, analytical, amazing book. You'll need like to have a glossary of terms that you make up yourself, because he's very much into like the Filone, which if you've read any of these books, you kind of know about the Filone, which sounds like Filonese. Yeah, if you're looking for something academic, you will absolutely love La Dolce Morte. It's incredible, and there's only one other book on here that I think is that cerebral, kinda. We'll talk about that one a little bit. You'll never see me write a book like La Dolce Morte. I can't even friggin' analyze my face. I don't know what I meant by that. Here's one I have not read yet. Leota picked it up for me, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. It's called Giallo Cinema and Its Folktale Roots by Michael Sevastakis. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. The last name is Sevastakis, and that's a very good book. I think. I actually have no idea. I'm excited, though. Speaking of cerebral, here's the one I was thinking of. Back to Dario Argento. We got Broken Mirrors, Broken Minds, The Dark Dreams of Dario Argento by Maitland McDonough. She is incredible. She is a super, super smart person, and this book is pretty dense. I think La Dolce Morte might be a little more dense. This could probably be more of a casual read, but not much. She really, really, really analyzes Argento's work and picks it apart. It's just really, really good. And I believe the second edition is easily available, so go ahead and grab it. One more. Nope. Oh, I lied. 2 more Argento books. Jeez. My pal, James Gracie, wrote a great book on Dario Argento called Dario Argento. And it is yet another examination of his work, but James writes very accessibly, and he's very passionate, and it's just really good stuff. I love his take on frickin' Argento. Now, we got the man who has become one of the secret patron saints of this show, thanks to Jeffrey. I'm talking about Luigi Cozzi, or our cozy pal, Luigi Cozy Cozzi. He wrote a book called Giallo Argento, and it's available, I believe, through the Profondo store, the Profondo Rosso store, the one in Italy. It is in English, and it's very fun. And Luigi Cozzi, he worked on several Dario Argento movies, so he was the man on the scene. And he provides some good analysis, and he also talks about just working with the guy. It's cool. It is time to address the elephant in the room, the very angry elephant, talking, of course, about Italian horror by Jim Harper. Folks, if there was one man who inspired me to start reviewing movies, especially Italian horror movies, and write books about Italian horror movies, it's this guy, Jim Harper. His book starts with Suspiria. No, his book starts with Zombie, Lucio Fulci's Zombie, and then goes all the way through the 2000s, like the early 2000s of Italian horror. And the reason it's so inspiring is because Jim Harper is such a dick. It is so weird. I can find a few movies in the book that he does like, but primarily it was an exercise of hatred for him. He's very negative about films that I think are classics, or just ones that are entertaining and fun. He just hates them because they're not good enough. And dude, it just riled me up. And to this day, I still look to it as a joke because I just disagree with him so wholeheartedly that it just made me wonder, why did he write a book about Italian horror? It's like he took it on because nobody else was doing it, but he was the wrong man for the job. And hey, it's well written, it's fine. I just don't like negative Nellies. I said it, darn it. Negative Nellies. Okay, this is something I just got Lietta hooked me up with this trilogy of books, and I had a little time to flip through a couple of them, but I didn't get very in-depth. I'm talking about Italian Gothic horror films by Roberto Curti, and the first volume is 1957 and 1969, second volume is 1970 to 1979, and last but not least, the third volume is 1980 to 1989. So he covers all kinds of stuff. These are thorough books. Not only does he review the films, he gives history of the Italian film industry, which is, like I said about Stephen Thrower book, it's just fascinating stuff to read. These books are really engaging. Like, they hit the ground running. So I suggest grabbing all three just based on what I've seen of them. I think you would do much worse by not buying them, bro. Okay. Let's see. What's next? Yes. I got 2 volumes here. These are coffee table books. This is not analysis or anything, but these are just cool to flip through. Talking about Voluptuous Terrors, 120 film posters from Italy by G.H. James. I don't know about you, but I love Italian movie posters. Those are just gorgeous. And these are neat. There's nothing much to say about them other than they're made very nicely and they're pretty to look at. But sadly, I don't remember even an introduction. I think it's just images, but maybe he did a 3rd volume. I'm not sure. Okay. Stephen Thrower back in this talkin'. Eyeball, Sex and Horror, Art and Exploitation. It's a book that's edited by Stephen Thrower. I don't know how easy this one is to get. Back in the day, I believe, they used to do a magazine called Eyeball, and this is the collected writings about cinema from that magazine. I'm not sure all who's involved in it. I forgot to grab it off the shelf before I started recording. But Eyeball's really good. My only complaint is the text is super small. Like, I need a freaking magnifying glass because I'm getting old here. But the writing in the book is really good. There's probably writing in there about Sallow and frickin' possession and the devils. Because that's what every European horror book has writings about. Just great stuff. Super smart analysis. Gets you list making. Speaking of list making, because you start reading these books and you keep the notepad or your electronic notepad called the ENP next to yourself, and you use your electronic writing pencil to write down titles of movies that you're reading about. And the book that I'm talking about inspired me to do just that. It's called Immoral Tales by Cathal Tohill, no idea if I have that right, and Pete Toombs. Immoral Tales is really cool. Goes through French and Spanish and Italian and maybe German sex and horror films. Emphasis on the sex and horror. I read about a lot of movies in that book I'll never watch, just FYI. But it is an incredible resource for all things like Jess Franco and Jose Ramon Larraz. Other directors I can't think of off the top of my head. I believe Sam and Kat of Daughters of Darkness podcast, I believe they use Immoral Tales a lot, or they covered most of the movies on their show. So check out their podcast. I'm pretty sure they did. Immoral Tales. Speaking of Pete Toombs, we're going to talk about frickin' Mondo Macabro. I just got this book. I remember...
I'm sort of foggy on the details.
I remember probably... Sorry, getting this book from the library a long time ago. Good old interlibrary loan. Great resource. If you have your library, ask them if they have an interlibrary loan department and then get some of these books for you. Mondo Macabro by Pete Toombs is an awesome resource for Asian cinema. I believe it's got some Bollywood talking in there. Just Asian stuff in general. Malaysia and, God, I don't even know all the countries that are in there. Flipping through it when I bought it, I was like, oh yeah, I have read this before. But then I put it back on the shelf and I haven't looked at it again. I know it's good because Pete Toombs is quality. But honestly, I might not remember the book well enough to expound on it. I'm pretty sure that they talk about things like Dangerous Seductress and frickin' Lady Terminator. So that stuff's in there. Wonderful. Oh, we're getting down to the end of this episode. Wow. Who knew? Back to Stephen Thrower yet again. This guy. He wrote 2 books about Jess Franco. And I thought I would never have these. I thought they were going to be wildly expensive, which they are not cheap, but they were expensive right when they came out. And then they were sold out. And I was pretty sad because I'd missed out on these books. As to whether or not they're easily available at this time of recording, I do not know. But I found the second volume. It's called Flowers of Perversion, The Delirious Cinema of Jess Franco. And it talks about his films from 1975 till the end of his career when he passed away. And so basically, I just call it the porno years. Luckily, for people who are less interested in sex films, he did a lot of stuff that, while it might have an erotic or sexy edge to it, it was not straight up, X or XXX pornos. They were movies. He even did some movies that were very much mainstream-ish, like spy movies and thrillers. It's very surprising. His career did a lot more stuff than you think. And I got that one first, thinking I would just have it just to have it. But here's what Stephen Thrower did that blew me away. It is a narrative book. It doesn't go by release date because Jess Franco's films are so weird. They get picked up, sit on a shelf for a long time, or they get released years after they were made. Strange stuff happens. So what he did was, he did it in a narrative way of when they were filmed, movie by movie as they were filmed, and then tells the story of his life along with these reviews. And holy crap, he and Lena Romay, his wife of many years until she passed away, the story of how he stole her is amazing. Jess Franco was a frickin' badass wife-stealing dude, so it's crazy. It is such a fascinating story. I don't mean to praise wife stealers, but dude, I have to frickin' give it to Jess Franco. He was a very interesting looking man. So, as much as I loved this second volume, even though I was not going to watch very many of the films I read about, to be perfectly honest, folks, if you don't know, I've seen about 50 or 55, maybe more Jess Franco films, and I'm not saying I've reached the point where I'll never watch any new ones again, but I need a break that I'm in, and I will continue taking a break until I'm ready. I'm always hoping for them to discover more of his horror films that aren't completely tinged with the sexy. Because as you know, I am neutered. I was loving the second volume, and all of a sudden, somebody's like, Volume 1 is back in an expanded edition, which was weird because Volume 1 had just come out like a couple years ago. All of a sudden, there's this expanded edition, and Volume 1 was on Amazon for $33, which is crazy cheap. Like, if you think that's a lot for a book, folks, here's how big it is. Look at how big this book is. I know you can't see me. This is a huge book, hundreds and hundreds of pages, and just like massive. These are books that like leave impressions on your body as you sit in bed and try to read them. I won't say which body part, but I let you choose where you want to rest your book, erotically or not. Wow, I'm really rambling. Thank you. I picked up Murderous Passions, the delirious cinema of Jess Franco. And holy shit, this book's even better than the first one because I'm actually more interested in his early work anyway. So wow, good stuff. I can't stress enough how much I love Stephen Thrower's work, and I will continue to love Stephen Thrower's work. Okay. Here's the last book we're going to talk about. This is a book by Kierla Janice. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. It's called A Violent Professional, The Films of Luciano Rossi. This is from Fab Press. And it's very small, but it packs a wallop. It is a book just about our buddy Luciano Rossi. If you've seen a Giallo or two, you've probably seen this guy. If you've seen some Italian crime films, you've probably seen this guy. One of my favorite roles is he plays the cop that's in City of the Living Dead who reacts to the fireball that comes flying out of the floor. That's Luciano Rossi. So he had roles like that, real small roles. And then he had roles that are much bigger, like in Death Walks at Midnight, where he's very frightening in that movie. God, it's such a great movie. And he is a great man. He passed away pretty young. He had a lot of health problems. But what's fun about this book is that the author not only does, I don't know if it's a she or a he, Kirla here, but they also, so they review the movie, they review his performance in the movie, and they give a star rating and a heart rating. So stars indicate how good the film is, and hearts indicate how hot Luciano Rossi was in the movie. So if you're only interested in him, you can check out how sexy he is in each movie. It's freaking hilarious. But it's a very heartfelt tribute to the man who was very underappreciated in his time. But yeah, it's just a fantastic book. I keep forgetting I have this one because it's so small. It just disappears in between other things, but I wanted to make sure I mentioned it. Ooh. All right. That's it. That's all I came to talk about on this episode. For part 3, I'm going to get into horror movie books that are more recent purchases. Like even some of them are even more recent than this. And they primarily focus on American horror films or British horror films. I wanted to get all the Euro stuff packed into one episode so you folks can be Eurologists. Yeah, I made that joke. Hello and welcome to Hello, This is the Doomed Show. I am Richard. Folks, as foretold in the book of Abon, I am here to discuss frickin' horror movie reference books. This is the 3rd part of the series. I did an episode, a solo show, just like this is a solo show, of part 1, which is the oldest of my horror movie reference books, the ones I acquired first that got me into reading about horror movies. Part 2 was the Euro cult and Giallo, or the Euro horror. I was trying to do a subliminal name drop for EuroCultAV.com right there. Wow for me. But no, Euro horror and Giallo episode, so that one's also in the feed there. You're free to check out. But I wanted to get back to the more recent acquisitions of my horror reference library here. And just finish up this topic because hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Before I get to the books, I want to talk about what's going on with the show. This summer, I'm going to start taking it a little easier for most of 2021. I've been doing about 3 episodes a month, and I'm tired, so I'm going to reel it in a little bit so I can get some other projects done. Also, I have a monumental birthday coming up this year, and I was planning on taking the entire month of August off anyway. But yeah, I think I'll be able to space things out. So for the rest of the summer, maybe the rest of the year, it'll just be 1 episode per month. I hope that doesn't try you guys' patience too much. Hopefully the episodes that come out will be that much more special. Plus, you guys need a reprieve from my voice. I mean, have you heard my voice?
It's hideous.
But let us talk about these frickin' books. First up, surprising literally no one, is a Stephen Thrower book, since Stephen Thrower has been taking up a lot of space on these episodes so far. I'm talking about the legendary, the massive Nightmare USA, the untold story of the exploitation independence by Stephen Jam Master J. Thrower. He probably doesn't go by that middle part, but this book is phenomenal. This book is like a fine wine that you sip or pour on your dead homie's grave very slowly. It is just a remarkable work, and I really hope that he'll do a sequel someday. I'm not sure what that sequel to this book would be like. This is so great. It just covers stuff like the Deadly Spawn. It covers things like the Strangeness. And what he does is he covers not only the film, but he'll cover the filmmakers behind the camera, of course, but give their complete histories outside of horror and whatever else they did that got them to that point to make that film. Then he'll go into the production history of that film. And it's just really incredible. I think he talks about Axe and a couple other just like legendary exploitation horror films. So get that if you can. It is so great. Next up, a book that I referred to a lot while Simon and I were talking about the Nightmare on Elm Street series, which is a book called Never Sleep Again by Tommy Hudson. That's Thommy. He did a phenomenal job covering the genesis of Nightmare on Elm Street, the pre-production, the casting, the production, the post-production, and the marketing and the legacy of one film. It's a very fat book, but it is like more than you ever wanted to know about Nightmare on Elm Street. I picked it up thinking it was about the whole series because it was so thick. And about a couple chapters in, I went, hold up, this is just about the first film. This is amazing. So highly recommend that one. Next up is a little gift I got. My pal Jacob Gustafson, the author of the Awful Awesome books, like Awful Awesome Action, Awful Awesome Horror, and I think Awful Awesome Science Fiction should be coming out soon. Jacob sent me a book called The New Poverty Row, Independent Filmmaking. The New Poverty Row, Independent Filmmakers as Distributors, by... Oh no. Why didn't I write down the author? Jeez. I got this. Oh, duh. This was by Fred Olin Ray, so you know it's going to be a real book because he's one of the dudes who was an independent filmmaker as distributor. So yeah, I need to check this one out. It is on my to-read stack, but I haven't gotten to it yet. It looks amazing. Next up is a little book called More Gore Score by Chaz Ballin. Chaz Ballin of Deep Red magazine. Chaz passed away quite a few years ago now, but a lot of folks who were really into reading about horror in the 80s and 90s cite Chaz as a huge influence. And I like what I've read of his. I don't think I've finished More Gore Score. He's very opinionated, to say the least. But yeah, apparently he was just a legendary dude. I cannot locate his other books. They're a little too rare, and when they do show up on used sites, they're way too expensive. But More Gore Score is an interesting little, a little spicy nutmeg. I don't know. It's a little nephew. Next up is Are You Alone in the House, which is a book edited by Amanda Reyes. This is a fantastic book about made-for-TV horror movies. It's a great reference book. The reviews are all really solid by everybody involved. And yeah, it turned me on to some titles I would have never, ever thought to seek out. So check out Are You Alone in the House? I have another book I have not read on my list here. This one's called The Kaiju Film by Jason Barr. Lietta and I were at a library conference, and I spotted it, and she managed to snag a copy of it for me, and I just haven't even cracked it yet, but it's probably great. Next up was a gift from my pal Tyler. Tyler has been on the show quite a few times. He saw the longing in my Facebook Messenger face and got me Taking Shape, the book about the Halloween movies by Dustin McNeil and Travis Mullins. This book, part 1, I don't have part 2 yet, but part 1 is so fascinating. It's really, really a great read. It's so fun to see the history of the Halloween franchise taken so seriously. And apparently the second book is about all of it focuses on all of the Halloween sequels we never got. So all of those screenplays that were bouncing around for years while production companies couldn't decide what to do and what director and writer to go with, all these screenplays were being pitched. So this book looks at those films we never got. I'm very curious to see how that shakes out. And speaking of people buying me things because they're freaking cool people, Brad got me a book called Analog Nightmares, shot on video horror films of 1982 to 1995 by Richard Mogg, M-O-G-G. I've read the introduction of this one, and I read the chapter on Boarding House, and that's as far as I've gotten so far, but this book seems really cool. As you know, Jeffrey and I have been attempting to cover some shot-on-video films every summer, just to destroy our brains. And of course, we did Boarding House many years ago, that's just something else. I've got a copy of Crystal Lake Memories by Peter M. Brack. I believe it's Brack. Could be Bracky. B-R-A-C-K-E. I don't remember where I got this one. Maybe Brad or my wife, Lietta, got it for me. Or my mother-in-law got it for me. Somebody got this book for me. But it is the definitive resource on the Friday the 13th books. Can't say enough good about it. It's just such a solid frickin' book. Next up is a classic. Oh my god, this book is a classic. The Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film by Michael Weldon. Wow. Now wow, brown cow. This book is one of those ones that you watch with a notebook. You watch?
You watch a book?
You read a book with a notepad, and then you frickin' take notes of titles you want to see. I have made pages and pages and pages of notes from the Psychotronic Encyclopedia. It is crazy how much insane stuff is packed into that book. I don't know how old that one is, but if you can find a cheap copy of it, just grab it. Even if it's falling apart from the previous owner's grubby hands, you should totally frickin' get that book. It's wonderful. In a similar vein, I've got some Video Hound books here. The Video Hound's Complete Guide to Cult Flicks and Trash Picks, edited by Carol Schwartz. This is another excellent resource for you to find films you've never seen, or to, jog your memory of things you have seen if you're getting old like I am. Next up is Video Hound's Horror Show, 999 Hair-Raising, Hellish, and Humongous Movies by Mike Mayo. I have owned this book forever, and I just don't know anything about it. I've grabbed it once in a while, but it does not stuck out in my memory whatsoever. The same could be said for Video Hound's Dragon, Asian Action and Cult Flicks by Brian Thomas. This is also a great resource for finding Asian cinema. The one I mentioned in the previous episode, The Sex and Zen and a Bullet to the Head, I prefer that book a lot more. I think there's a lot more, at least like a memorable sense of passion to it. And this Video Hound one feels like a catch-all encyclopedia, so you can at least find out something exists. But I don't want to undervalue these books just because I don't remember the last time I opened them. Doesn't mean they're not amazing resources.
Ma, you're crazy. Another decaffeinated coffee?
Well, caffeine bothers your dad.
But why keep trying?
Because I love him, and besides, this new one tastes great.
New improved ground Sanka brand decaffeinated coffee. We think a blend of 2 kinds of beans make it twice as good, and it can be a lot better for your family if caffeine bothers them.
Well, I don't like it.
See?
I love it.
Oh.
New ground Sanka brand decaffeinated coffee. It's a loving cup.
Speaking of amazing resources, we've got the Video Watchdog book by Tim Lucas. This book, I believe, might be a little dated. The writing, because, Tim Lucas of Video Watchdog and all those great Mario Bava commentaries is in this book, but a lot of it is about the different versions of films. So if you're really hung up on different versions of films and finding the most complete version you can, I know Simon and I know someone like that, but we won't go into that here. This book is great for that transitionary period right before DVD, when you were trying to find tapes from all of these maybe not so honest sellers, and they were giving you what they claimed was the uncut version of a film. And of course, if the movie is 25 minutes shorter than it's supposed to be, there might be something wrong with their quote-unquote uncut version. But yeah, it's still a great read. I really wish I had that ginormous Mario Bava book that Tim Lucas wrote. I really like books that will cut your legs off if you drop them, or books that are so big you have to read them from a helicopter. Keep in mind the book is on the ground. You're in the helicopter looking down at the book. You got it? Got it. All right. And for some reason I thought my list was longer, but it turns out my list is not longer. The last one on this frickin' list here is Spooky Encounters, a Guailo's Guide to Hong Kong Horror. Guailo being what Chinese and Hong Kongans call frickin' white people, which I love. But that's by Daniel O'Brien. Another really cool and passionate book about a subject I love very much. I love Hong Kong horror. I love those hopping vampires. I love the kitchen sink effect, where the movie feels like it can't go any farther, but then it goes 3 times farther than you expected. Hong Kong cinema is some of my favorite stuff I don't know what I'm getting into. And even when I do, even when I've read how crazy a film is from Hong Kong, it really doesn't prepare me for exactly how crazy it's going to be. So yeah, if you can find that one too, give it a pick up. What else can I talk about? Well, before I go, I will take this opportunity to plug some of my books that I've written, since we're talking about books. If you go to the old Amazon.com, you can find a little book called Giallo Meltdown, a Movie-thon diary by me. That's Richard Glenn Schmidt, if you're really looking for my name. I also wrote a book called Doomed Movie-thon, and I wrote a little book called Cinema Somnambulist. All of those are on the Amazon. If you look around at my name in Amazon, you'll find a couple magazines I've written for. I've written for Monster, with an exclamation point, magazine, and I've written for Wang's Chop. That's WENG''S Chop. I don't get any money from the magazines. Those costs go right to keeping the magazine alive. I am more than happy to see my name in print because I'm a horrible narcissist, and that's the kind of things that horrible narcissists do. They write movie reviews. As for other projects I got going on, Giallo Meltdown 2, the sequel to my Giallo book, where I review lots of Giallo movies, is coming along. I'm on chapter 7, and it's painful doing movie-thons now that I'm at an advanced age. Watching 15 movies in a weekend is getting more and more difficult and just unpleasant for my brain. I'm trying to keep my spirits up and not take out any of my discomfort and rage from, being tired onto the movies. Only once in a while a movie offends me to the point where I take the DVD and snap it in half, and then I want to quit writing about movies because I'm so pissed off. A little movie out there called Morbo. It's an Italian? No, it's a Spanish film. It's a Spanish film, and there was some really egregious animal torture in it, and I snapped the movie in half, and I was shaking with rage, and it made me want to never watch. Well, it made me never want to trust a filmmaker again. Like, I want to have a film vetted. I want to pay someone else to watch the movie for me before I bother when they're going to frickin' torture animals in the movie. And it makes me feel like I'm losing my fucking mind. But anyway, 7 chapters of Giallo Meltdown are done. Is that past the halfway mark of the book? I think so. I hope so. I'm not sure if it's going to be 13 or 14 chapters, each chapter being a movie-thon. But I'm trying, man. I'm really trying to make this book better than Giallo Meltdown. Giallo Meltdown was like 6 years ago, 5 years ago. I hope I'm improving as a writer. Hopefully, when I put this one out, I won't release it with all the horrible spelling errors. Don't worry, Giallo Meltdown still has lots of spelling errors. But when I put it out, I decided that my one read-through of a 200-plus page book was fine, and not thinking I needed to take a breath, look at the beautiful proof copy, and then sit down and proceed to read it all over again, and with a highlighter, and fix all the mistakes I missed the first time. I really thought I didn't have to do that. It turns out I really had to do that. So the first 70 copies, I can't even believe I sold 70 copies, all have horrible mistakes. So if you notice mistakes on every page of Giallo Meltdown, you've got one of the early versions. You've got the early version. Yes, the book still has some errors left in it, even after my second pass. But likely I will never go back and correct those. I could go back and correct some of my opinions. There's a few films in there I was probably really shitty about, and now I feel guilty that I love that film now. But, whatever. It's a little moment in time. Let's leave it alone. What else is going on with me before I hang up on this one-way Skype call? I've been working on an album called Melting Lumberjack. The title track is probably about that movie Fire in the Sky. I kind of came up with the title before I thought what it was about. But it's a very interesting album. I'm trying my best. Folks, if you've talked to me over the years, you know I'm always putting out these weird solo sound records of just noises and weird crap I make with my guitars between my band Gyro Jet's music. Because, Gyro Jet's, there's 2 other people, and we got to work and hang out and learn songs before we hit record, and that's always a pain in the butt. So with me on my solo projects, I can just do whatever I want and release it. But over the years, I've noticed that I am not happy with any of those. So I'm trying to put a lot more work and care into this particular album. I will definitely tell you guys when it's done, because I am sick of working on it. I'm so tired of this album, you have no idea. Usually I put stuff out after a weekend. I'll record an entire album in a weekend and drop it on Monday. This one has basically been going for a couple of years. I've been working on it off and on for 2 years. Didn't even know that I had all this stuff recorded already, and then whatever. It's boring. But that's the other thing that's going on with me. As for the podcast, as for what's going on with the show, at the top of the hour here, I mentioned that we're going to slow things down this summer. I love talking to my co-hosts, and I love reaching out to you guys with your ears and telling you things about movies. But all of the rest of the podcast world is a real pain in the ass. That does not include getting to talk to other podcasters and getting to be on a network. Strictly talking about the editing process of a podcast and the promotion stuff of a podcast. That stuff does not interest me at all. As you can see, I don't work very hard on getting this show out there. but it feels like a chore just to do Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and get these things going. It's just a nightmare. What we need is a producer. So like if the podcast was not in the red all the time, because like the amount of time and effort that we put into the show, we never turn a profit. We will never turn a profit, despite the best efforts and some very kind people who have slipped us some cash over the years. Mark, I'm talking to you, of course. We would need to make money, like lots of money, and I could hire a producer and an editor. A producer to make sure that, we made money on the thing and it got promoted, and then a frickin' an editor to do all the editing for me. Because I've tried to like be real and reduce.
I've tried to be real
and release these episodes completely raw, and I can't. I just can't not edit these things. But that's just me complaining. So, long story short, too late. Little less of a productivity here at the Doomed Show house, but fear not, we're going to be hanging around. We'll be here. I'll probably guest star in some other people's shows so they have to edit. I think that's good on them for letting me. I was able to be on the Talkin' Stock podcast with Barry and Darren. I was able to be on the Kiss the Goat podcast with X and Cootie. And I was also a guest star on The Iron Sequel, which is an amazing show hosted by James. And we had a great time talking about Halloween Resurrection, with the famous line, "Trick or treat, mother trucker." Folks, I'm going to go. I'm rambling. Here's me scrunching up my notes. Wow. Realistic sound effects. And take care. Hope you guys are surviving this disgustingly hot summer. Unless you live somewhere like Australia where it's snowing, then stay warm, stay cool, stay dry. Goodbye.
Hello, This is the Doom Show is a proud member of the Legion Podcast Network. Please check out the other podcasts on legionpodcasts.com. If you'd like more Hello, This is the Doom Show, go to hellodoomshow.podomatic.com or go to doomedmoviethon.com for the archives. If that's still not enough, go to @doomedmoviethon on Twitter. You can write in to Hello, This is the Doom Show. Use the email doomedmoviethon@gmail.com. Doom Show episodes are available on record and 8-track cassette.